We are awaiting the members of the Select Committee on January 6th, who just minutes from now will be gathering for a special meeting. They are voting tonight on a measure to refer criminal charges for two of Donald Trump's former advisors, Trump's social media manager and advisor Dan Scavino and his trade secretary, Peter Navarro. Both witnesses violated their subpoenas by refusing to turn over documents or sit for depositions. And both were deeply involved in the scheme to subvert the results of a Democratic election and pull off the first American coup. In the 34-page contempt report, the committee says Scavino was likely with Trump on January 5th and 6th. And they say they have reason to believe he may have had advanced warning about the potential for violence. Separately, we know Navarro worked with alt-right extremist and former Trump advisor Steve Bannon on a plot he called the Green Bay Sweep to delay certification of the vote. And Navarro has explicitly said that Trump was on board with that strategy. Separately, the Washington Post reports that the committee now wants to interview Ginny Thomas, the wife of Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas. Their scrutiny stems from the explosive and, frankly, bizarre, seemingly QAnon-fueled text messages that Ginny Thomas exchanged with Trump Chief of Staff Mark Meadows, in which she encouraged him to overturn the 2020 election. This comes after the committee today scored a significant victory in court against Trump lawyer and insurrection memo author John Eastman, who tried and failed to weasel out of a subpoena for documents. More explosive, however, is that the judge in that case said that Trump probably committed a felony when he tried to stop Congress from certifying the vote for Joe Biden. In his sweeping and historic 44-page ruling against Eastman today, U.S. District Court Judge David Carter wrote, based on the evidence, the court finds it more likely than not that Trump corruptly attempted to obstruct the joint session of Congress on January 6, 2021. With me now, Joyce Vance, professor at the University of Alabama School of Law and a former U.S. attorney, Elie Mystal, justice correspondent for The Nation, and Peter Strzok, former FBI counterintelligence agent. Thank you all for being here, Joyce. I'm going right to you. I am reading through this 44-page ruling, and even just as a layperson, it's pretty jaw-dropping. The walkthrough that the federal judge Carter takes us through what happened, and this seemingly very specific plot between Eastman and members of Congress, and it's seemingly coordinated through the president. Your thoughts on that ruling?
So the judge lays out the evidence for criminality between Trump and Eastman in very much the way that I'm used to doing as a federal prosecutor in a document we call a prosecutive memo that folks in a U.S. attorney's office sit around and take a look at to decide whether there's sufficient evidence to indict. And in this case, the evidence is laid out in a very compelling and linear fashion. The judge considers the evidence of Trump's intent, which, Joy, you and I have talked about a lot, because that's an important and hard-to-prove issue, and concludes that it's there. But there's one important caveat. This judge is looking at the evidence in a civil case context, which means he only had to decide it was more likely than not that the former president and John Eastman were engaged in criminal conduct. And, of course, the burden of proof in a criminal case is much heavier. It's proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
Yeah, and let me read. This is number 4 for my wonderful producers. And this is what was written as part of this. Eastman and Trump, per the judge, launched a campaign to overturn the Democratic election, an action unprecedented in American history. Their campaign was not confined to the ivory tower. It was a coup in search of a legal theory. If Eastman and Trump's plan had worked, it would have permanently ended the peaceful transfer of power, undermining American democracy and the Constitution. And Elie, as we're starting to get pieces of this story, it seems that there were some members of the United States Senate and the wife of a Supreme Court justice who both seem to be on the same page and have the same legal theories, I'll put in scare quotes, and be operating almost as if, they were playing from the same playbook, that's for sure. Ginny Thomas, who seemed very determined that the vice president of the United States act to overturn the election, and Ted Cruz, who there's an extensive story about him in the Washington Post about his seeming complicity. Your thoughts?
Joy, shh. We don't want to wake Merrick Garland. Okay, we have to be careful to protect him from having to wake up and do his job. I mean, look, to be honest, Joyce was just talking about what she would do as a prosecutor's office. And quite frankly, a prosecutor would be great. It'd be great if we had one in America who was willing to prosecute and defend our country instead of what we have going on right now. Think about it this way. The ruling that we have, which is a great ruling and it kind of lays everything out, that's going to be appealed because the Trump side has no good argument. They just have a delay tactic. So they're going to appeal. It's going to go to the circuit court, and then it's going to go to the Supreme Court, where one of the people who was implicated in this scheme, their husband, will be one of the judges at the Supreme Court to decide whether or not these emails can actually get out, right? Like, that is the system that we have right now. And the person who is supposed to be on our side fighting against that system is, I mean, like we say every time I'm on the show, either Merrick Garland has a super secret investigation going on that nobody knows about, but he's got all the cards and he's ready to go, or it's the biggest failure of an attorney general in American history. Those are the stakes right now, and that's what we're looking at.
And that's what we're looking at. I just want to tell you what you are looking at as you look at the screen. This is the members of the January 6th committee taking a walk in there. I think we have a couple more minutes. I want to get Peter Strzok in here because, you know, the best thing for you as a former FBI guy is when they just admit they did it. You know, that makes your job a lot easier. Here's Peter Navarro coming on Ari Melber's show thinking he's the smartest man in the room, but just being the guy who admitted he did it. Here he is.
If the votes were sent back to those battleground states and looked at again, that there would be enough concern amongst the legislatures that most or all of those states would decertify the election, that would throw the election to the House of Representatives.
Do you realize you are describing a coup?
No, I totally reject many of your premises there.
Ari tried to alert him to the foolishness the fool he just made of himself. But I mean, Peter, the thing that's so wild is that when you read the Washington Post piece about what Ted Cruz was advising be done, if you read the Eastman memo about what he was claiming could be done, and you go through what Ginny Thomas wanted to be done, and what Donald Trump was demanding be done, they're all the same. Your thoughts?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Joy. Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And I think that's all the more reason it's important to talk to all these people. Now, there are two tracks going on. One, we're watching tonight. We're watching the Congressional Committee, bringing people in, the folks that won't come in, trying to decide whether or not they're going to refer them for contempt prosecutions. But the second part is the criminal justice process. And I understand, I have tremendous respect for Ellie. I have tremendous understanding for the urgency and sense of urgency and wanting to get this information out. But the fact of the matter is, our criminal justice process takes time. And that's by design. And I get that, you know, we need to and want to get these people on the record. We want to see results as soon as we can. But the fact of the matter, to Joyce's point, this is, we have to prove up, if we're going to bring charges, it has to be up to a probable cause or proof beyond a reasonable doubt standard. And all the different elements of the crime, there has to be admissible evidence, what we can either show through an email, through a statement, through testimony, that we can achieve that high hurdle. And I can't tell you how many times I walked into work as an FBI agent just frustrated because I knew somebody had done something wrong, and I knew that I was never going to be able to take it to a U.S. Attorney's office and get them charged. And so we see two things going on right now. One is that route, and that may not get people the truth and the satisfaction they want. The other route, the route that we're watching folks walk into right now, that may be the better path to getting to the truth of what happened on January 6th.
We just saw Liz Cheney walk in, and she's probably the most, a lot of Republicans are angry with her. Let's just say she's probably going to be number one for a lot of Republicans. But I think for a lot of people, she's a truth teller, at least in this instance. And I think the challenge, and Ellie and I probably are on the same page. I'm going to assume you, I'm not going to speak for you, Ellie. The problem is that, you know, in the case of New York, Cy Vance's successor inherited a case that Cy Vance, who was not exactly tough on Trump in his career, believed was ready to go. He had what Peter Strzok just said that you need. A great case that he literally believed when he left that office could be prosecuted, and his successor in New York, the current New York AG, said, I don't want to do it. And so the problem is not doing anything is a political decision. I worry that Merrick Garland is making a political decision, that it would be too upsetting for Republicans and for Trump supporters if he did the thing that seems obvious, which is to pursue a case that is about an American coup. Your thoughts?
If it's me.
So if you're asking me. Oh, go ahead, Ellie.
That's for you, Ellie.
Okay, so let's also add the fact that the criminal referral for Mark Meadows was given to Garland months ago. like long time ago, and there still isn't criminal indictment for that contempt. So like the contempt that maybe they vote on tonight, like when does that get handled by Garland? And remember, there is a tick, 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 tick clock going on here. 8 months, that's when the midterm election is. Arguably, that's when the select committee's investigation is stopped. If Garland isn't here now he's going to be in a situation where perhaps he has to work against Congress. It's just, we need to be moving a lot quicker than what we're seeing.